Hello everyone, Floppy Waffle 69 here, and welcome back to the channel. Hey guys, today we are going to be doing a review that is a little bit overdue, maybe a little bit late, but sure enough, we are finally getting to it, and that is on the Tier 10, I guess sort of reward ship or a Decade at Sea festive tokens exchangeable reward ship, the Kushiro. This is the latest edition for the Japanese, and this is going to cost you about 10,000 of these festive tokens that can be accumulated over the span of the event. Now, obviously, I don't have the number in front of me, how many lines that's going to take, or sorry, how many ships that's going to take in order to like get that off on certain vessels or certain strategies do that. I don't have that. I'm just here to look at the raw ship and answer the question, is she worth it? Now, obviously on this channel, that is a very subjective question. And I've said this in the past, just because I don't think it's fair for me to tell you if a ship is worth it or not worth it, if it's good or bad. I'm just here to showcase the raw stats and overall gameplay of the ship, talk about or what I like, what I dislike, and then it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to exchange your 10,000 festive tokens for this vessel. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a tier 10 special ship that you can add to your arsenal, and it is pretty exclusive for a time event. I'm assuming Wargaming will eventually add the ship into the game at some point in time, but again, that's probably not going to be anytime soon, as I'm sure they want to create kind of an exclusivity, whatever the hell, however the hell you say it, kind of theme behind this ship. So I'm going to go ahead and do my best to do a kind of review on this vessel, answer the question, is she worth it for you? That is for you to decide, guys. So kind of to start this off, what is this ship? Basically, if you took a Takahashi hull, you slapped Ibuki guns onto it, and go ahead and sauced those Zao 8-kilometer torpedoes that nobody uses, as they are most likely using the 12-kilometer torpedoes, and you go ahead and add a fuel exhaust smoke on top of that. It's kind of a conglomeration of all sorts of reused assets and other gimmicks from other ships, kind of slapped on this this hull. That's a reused asset, and packaged as a new ship. This isn't the first time we've seen Wargaming do this, and I'm sure as hell know this ain't gonna be the last. And I've seen a lot of misconceptions about this ship too. Okay, I cannot tell you. First of all, don't listen to everybody on Reddit. That's the first thing. And there's a lot of YouTubers too that have made videos on this ship that I just flat out disagree with the overall play style and build. Obviously, I am a cruiser main. I love my cruisers. I know how to play my cruisers, and I can tell you there's a lot of YouTubers that are just building the ship flat out wrong, and for them to say that this ship is bad, I don't really agree with that statement, because I think everyone has been comparing the ship to the Zao, which I understand why you would. Both are heavy cruisers, both are armed with 203s, but I think comparing the ship to the Zao is not necessarily fair to both ships. I think they have similar roles, but I can't stress this enough. I think the overall play style, where it does share some similarities, does differ in some key area and aspects of the ships. I think the ship is more comparable to the Yodo, in my opinion. Instead of looking at the ship as a 203mm gunned cruiser, I would look at it more as a 203mm gunned light cruiser that now has those 203s to not only have higher HE raw penetration, but also have the ability to punish broadsides. The Yodo has a lot of guns. I think it's like 16 guns, so that is why it's such an infamous fire starter. Yes, a longer reload for a light cruiser, but still. But it doesn't really have the ability with its AP to punish broadsides, where now the Kushiro has that ability. Again, the Zao, a little bit longer in the reload department, but it has freaking rail guns as its main battery and artillery, therefore landing more shells consecutively at longer ranges, where, like, as we know, the Ibuki has these little floatier shell arcs, kind of what we've seen throughout the line until we get to the Zao. The Zao is the big difference or change within this line. So again, not really being a fair comparison to the Zao, at least in my eyes, right? Again, a side note, these turrets do turn 360 degrees, so it does allow us to have a little bit more flexibility when it comes to the Japanese slower than average turret traverse when we find them on their cruisers. We usually know when we grind it, but we did a whole down the line series on the Zao, and as you guys know, you really have to pre-plan your turret placement and layout when it comes to, maneuvering to make sure you have all your turrets to bear and where you want them. And the Kushiro could kind of get away with that, even though at times when you close the distance, you will notice that you are out-turning your turrets just a tad bit. So please keep that in mind as well. Now, these shells, they are floaty. These are Ibuki shells. You know, I've seen one YouTuber talk about how apparently the community in general doesn't mind or likes the Ibuki. Again, I love the Ibuki. I do. I really do have a soft spot for that ship, but I can 100% attest that the community does not like the Ibuki. The Ibuki is renowned as a ship that just explodes if a battleship looks at it. It doesn't really do much, and it really struggles, especially here in 2025. So that person who said that, I can't disagree with that statement enough, and I really think that that particular player should reassess the community's, I guess, statement or look on the Ibuki. Okay, gonna talk about the armor here for a bit. This is worth talking about too. I've seen a lot of people saying about how this ship is actually quite tanky for having a Takahashi hull. Well, that's because it shares the same citadel and overall ship model as the Takahashi, but there is one major difference that this ship has over the Takahashi, and that is instead of having the, was it 25 or 27, I think it's 25 millimeter side plating and armor belt, we've actually now gone up to 30 millimeters. This is going to allow us for more of that deterring and what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more, I want to say tanky because that's not the right word, but it allows us to shrug off some smaller caliber AP shells, which again, 406 millimeters is not small by any means, but in regards to how the game's gone with power creep, with larger and larger gun calibers coming into the game, cruiser players aren't really looking at 406s anymore and going, oh my god, I better fucking maneuver accordingly. They're kind of looking at 406s how they used to look at 380 millimeter guns. So this allows us to deter some battleships and get away with some shots that necessarily we normally couldn't get away with, or we wouldn't be able to get away with the Takahashi. And that all comes down to the armor formula, or sorry, the shell overmatch formula with 14.3 times the gun caliber. It has to be greater than that of the gun caliber or something like that. Again, I'll if you're not familiar with that formula, go ahead and get yourself familiar with that formula, because that's a very vital number when it comes to armor values and overmatch. As cruisers, that is a vital target because it gives us our vital statistic, as it gives us a lot of information when fighting those specific ships to plan our maneuvers accordingly, right? And pick and choose engagements. Going to the torpedoes. Okay, again, I'm trying to make sure I hit every point here accordingly. I actually wrote shit down for once, so holy fuck, good for me. I feel pretty good about this. But the torpedoes, okay? Again, I'm seeing a lot of other fellow content creators talking about how they're speccing into the torpedoes. Why? These are 8-kilometer torpedoes, okay? This ship does not do well at close range, okay? Why would you spec into torpedoes that are far below that of your base concealment value just because you have the fuel exhaust smoke now? This isn't Apollo Emilio. You have a massive citadel where there's usually 4 to 5 or more battleships in a game on the enemy team. So I think that's just stupid. And you have a massively exposed citadel too, with realistically no troll armor like the Zao gets, right? Don't spec into these torpedoes. Don't be stupid. And don't force yourself in situations where you feel like you have to utilize these torpedoes. These torpedoes, in my opinion, are a last resort torpedo. These are not pushing torpedoes or aggressive-minded torpedoes. That is dumb, okay? They do not complement the play style of the ship, is what I'm trying to say. I would have loved to have the 12-kilometer torpedoes on the ship. Hell, I would have even loved to have the Yodo's 15 or even the Yoshino's 20. But the 8 kilometers, I feel, is rather lackluster. Yes, they do a lot of damage. I will give them that. But that's all they have really going for them, at least in my opinion, is that raw alpha damage. And if someone is dumb enough to get hit by these 8-kilometer torpedoes, that's on them. And it shouldn't be any, tipping the hat to you as a player, because you're really taking your ship outside of its element, which makes it strong. Okay? Also, a side note about the guns, about the AP and the HE. We already talked about how they're floatier shells. Your AP pen is rather ass. I believe at 14 kilometers, the Zao is almost beating you in 100 millimeters of extra penetration the Zao gets on its 203 millimeter guns rather than you. So again, you have the the opportunity to punish broadside and cruisers, but again, I would pick my spots. I would say around roughly the 13 to 12 kilometer range or lower. If cruisers are broadside to you, by absolute means, switch to the armor piercing. But HE is going to be your best friend in this ship most likely 90% of the time, where the Zhao is a little bit more optimistic or whatever, and can basically use its stealth and switch from AP to HE. Whereas this thing, the only time you're really going to be switching to AP is if you're in the close range engagements, or for utilizing your fuel exhaust smoke to get into those advantageous positions and catch cruisers off guard. Is basically when you're going to utilize this AP. It's not going to be, I'm going to load this shit and I'm going to shoot at a ship because I feel like I'm going to get that lucky Citadel break here and there. It's not going to happen, okay? All right. Going into some other things about the Yoshino, and I guess I want to talk about the upgrades a bit and how I have the ship set up and how I have her built, because there are some key differences from how I have her built rather than I think the overwhelming majority of the community is kind of building her, or players that just have no idea how to play her. First of all, if you're looking at the ship like it's going to be some Japanese Paolo Emilio, I can tell you right now, this is not that ship. So do not play this ship like that, because you will get deleted and then you'll have the opinion that this ship is ass, okay? Do not do that. Don't be stupid. At the end of the day, this is a kiter through and through that now has the ability and flexibility to fall on and off detection based upon not only its 11.4 kilometer stealth build, the way I have it set up, or its fuel exhaust smoke. This is more or less like, I would utilize this smoke screen as more of how the Italian battleships utilize this smoke screen, not the Giuseppe Verdi. I'm talking more about like the main line, than utilizing it like the Italian cruisers. I'm trying to get into those positions and catch a destroyer off guard, because yes, it can do that. It has a shorter smoke firing penalty. I think it's like 7.6 kilometers. But again, because this ship turns like a fucking truck, and it has this massive turning circle radius, I would just tread on the side of caution. And you're going to see here in the background, the game number 1. Once I get into close range engagements, this ship struggles. It is not good. It's not good. So going to the upgrades, okay? Slot 1 obviously is main armaments mod 1, though I see the argument to do the spotter plane modification. I would still, because you have the way the guns are, the way the torps are, I would spec into the durability of my shells, or sorry, the durability of my armaments, just because I find them more often than not getting knocked out. At the end of the day, you are still just a cruiser. Slot 2, I went ahead and took the steering gears modification. Again, repair time, yada yada yada. It makes more sense to do that, right? So here comes the interesting stuff. Slot 3, okay? I take aiming systems. And why is that? Well, this doesn't have the DD dispersion that Zhao gets. So in general, this is going to be a not as accurate, not as consistent ship compared to that of the Zhao, okay? When it comes to like landing its shells on target. So that's one reason. Another reason, about this ship that I take that, or like an argument to taking the aiming systems, is the smoke screen modification. Okay, I understand the reason why you want to do that and build into a longer fuel exhaust, smoke time duration, and all that jazz. That's fine. If you think that's what this ship needs, go ahead and do it. For me personally, 33 seconds with the build I'm running is more than enough time to get a salvo 2 or 3 off and make sure I'm disengaging from the engagement and in the kited position. This is not a pushing smokescreen. This is not a smokescreen where I'm going to want to be aggressive and utilize it to fire from concealment over and over and over and time again. This smokescreen allows me to get 1 or 2 salvos off and make sure I turn my ship's ass around and I'm kited away, because that is where this ship is going to shine and where it is going to be safe. If you're pushing in the ship, the turret firing angles, especially the front 3 turrets, aren't very good. And especially you're not going to be able to get your rear turrets off and to hit the target. So you're only going to be shooting 6, potentially 4 shells on target when pushing in. Doesn't make much sense. I want to make sure I utilize as many of my battery guns as time and get as many shells down range as possible, and that's going to be more plausible in the kited position. In slot 4, I go ahead and take prop mod 1, okay? This is going to be easier, or make it easier for me to do engine juking at kited position and range. And also, because you have the floatier shells now of that of the Ibuki rather than the Zao fucking railguns, this is going to allow you to sit behind islands and kind of farm over the top of them. I have utilized this strategy more often than not, because at the end of the day, if I'm able to trade damage, like just basically take all this free damage and not have to trade any of my ship's HP, that is a win for me. Okay, that is a win for me. The ship does not like to be shot at, and nor does the ship want to be shot at. This ship is going to be frustrating for a lot of enemy ships because I find this ship starting more fires than not. I believe it has a 14% fire chance with the build I have, plus the signal flags or whatever, which is actually not bad. Again, with a 9.7 second reload with the build I have, I'm getting a decent amount of fires, or at least finding myself getting a decent amount of fires. Is it better than the Zao? Debatable. It's all RNG based, but I still think the Zao, in theory, at least in my mind, after playing the Zao, playing the Kushiro, is just going to generate more fires because it's landing more shells consistently on target, which is a big factor that a lot of people don't pay enough attention to, right? Going to slot 5. Do not, and I cannot stress this enough, do not take concealment mod, okay? This ship does not need the double concealment buff you get from the captain and from the ship upgrades, okay? If you're doing that, this ship turns, it's kind of like the Yoshino treatment, the Azuma treatment. People sometimes build into that, but they don't understand that the ship itself it operates more like a battleship. And this is no exception to this ship. It is so sluggish. It turns so poorly. You can't maneuver at all. And then you're relying on your armor to help mitigate it. And you can't turn, and your armor is trash. And you're just going to be eating unnecessary damage. Whereas if you take the double rudder shift, or sorry, the rudder shift instead of the concealment mod, it's going to buff your rudder down from 8.5 seconds to 5.1, which is night and day. And you're going to be able to notice that lickety split. So please, please, please do not take concealment. Go ahead and take the steering gears. It's gonna make you feel way more comfortable with this ship, and it's gonna make your ship a little bit more flexible to mitigate that incoming damage potentially, right? And then obviously in slot 6, I'm taking main battery mod 3 to get my reload down below 10 seconds, which is gonna increase my DPM. Which is not bad, plus the floatier shells. Again, they're going to have a higher hang time over, unlike the Zao, so we're going to want to make sure we're sending down shells downrange every 9.7 seconds, plus if you take the Adrenaline Rush skill, which I highly recommend you do, that could further decrease your reload depending on how much damage you've taken throughout the course of the game, and what your HP currently is at. Do not take the range mod. Your shells are so floaty, and I understand on my Ibuki video I did back in the day, I did say take the range mod, which again, the Ibuki is different. Okay, the Ibuki doesn't have the 30 mil plating that goes up on the side. It's very, very, very squishy and eats citadels left, right, and center. This ship can do the same thing too, but now we have the fuel exhaust smoke and we want to buff that reload down, which is going to help mitigate that downside for us. So don't take the range mod. You're going to find the ship was way more effective sending shells down range every 9.7 seconds or less, rather than having to wait over around 11 seconds plus in order to send shells down range. Okay. And the last thing I want to talk about before I get to the captain build is the consumables. You have 5 consumable slots. You have your damage control party, your repair party, your fuel exhaust smoke, your hydro / defensive AA that share a slot, and your spotter / fighter that share a spot. Obviously, your fuel exhaust smoke, this has an action time of 30 seconds that can be buffed with the captain skills I'm running up to 33, and it has about a 2-minute cooldown. Obviously, you should be taking hydro because the defensive AA isn't going to increase your likelihood of shooting down any more planes anyways. The AA on this ship is rather lackluster, rather meh. You will shoot down a couple planes here and there, but defensive AA isn't going to make it any, night or day unless you're playing against bad aircraft carrier players. And the last thing is spotter or fighter. I shouldn't even have to tell you guys this. The spotter is way more impactful on this ship than the fighter could ever be. Also because the fighter consumable is kind of trash and doesn't really do anything. So please use the spotter, and with the build I'm running with, I think, Eye in the Sky, it does decrease the duration of the spotter, but it increases the, cooldown speed, and it allows it to come online quicker and faster, which is something that I very much want to do. Again, here in the back is an example of the armor piercing, when you should be utilizing it, and it can absolutely slap at these ranges. That's when you should be utilizing it. Where the Yodo, I don't even know if the Yodo could hit citadels here, because that's how poor the AP penetration is. Again, you angle right. I'm not saying this Des Moines is a very good player, But again, the AP 100% with the 360-degree turrets can punish ships at closer ranges, so go ahead and make use of that. Okay, but going back to the consumables, as I just listed, those are your 5 consumable slots. 100% take the Hydro and 100% take the Spotter. Do not look at the defensive AA, but pretty much treat that like that doesn't even exist. And the Spotter, or sorry, the Fighter doesn't actually exist, so don't take the Fighter. You should be fine with the Spotter and Hydro, and especially take Eye in the Sky when we get to the Captain build. Now, the Captain build, in my opinion, is pretty self-explanatory. I told you that you want to go ahead and take Grease the Gears because your turret traverse is rather lackluster. I actually don't take Demo Expert because I find the fire chance to be relatively rather spicy. I don't think I need to buff that any further. I go ahead and take that consumable cooldown skill. I can't remember the name of it. That's going to make it, or sorry, the consumable duration skill, which is going to increase every consumable I have up by 10%, which I'm mainly doing that for not only the spotter plane, but I'm also doing that for my smoke screen. So I'm going to want to do that as well. And that's going to buff it from 30 to like 33.3 or something like that, which is nice. It gives me an extra 3 seconds that I could probably farm an additional salvo from and disengage a little bit longer, which is nice. Damage mitigation helps with the overall survivability of the ship. Another skill, obviously, is Superintendent. I need an extra charge of all my consumables, especially looking at you heal. And again, the spotter plane isn't bad. And then I go ahead and take Concealment Expert in that 4th slot because we want to get our concealment down to 11.4, I believe, is the build that I'm running. And 11.4 is definitely usable and definitely competitive, which is going to allow this ship to get in certain positions and make the most use out of it. Plus, even when the fuel exhaust smoke is down, 11.4 is still respectable, and I can position my ship accordingly in order to take full advantage of that as well. Obviously, I want to take the skill that I always forget the name. That's the skill that buffs your main battery reload by 10% as long as you're within your ship's base detection. 11.4, you definitely can make use of that. That's probably the closest I would recommend I want to play the ship around. I wouldn't really want to go lower than 10 kilometers unless I'm forced into that scenario. You want to stay just outside of that. But that skill allows us to get a little bit of a reload buff if we find ourselves in a situation. Because at the end of the day, you are just a Japanese heavy cruiser. You don't have the fast-firing guns that a lot of other cruiser lines have. So again, you're gonna have to find those little buffs here and there to help mitigate that weakness that you have. Obviously, taking Adrenaline Rush, pretty self-explanatory. You're gonna take damage. Okay, you most likely are going to take damage, and especially if you're like me in this game behind you, which you're conserving your HP towards the final fight at the end, eventually Adrenaline Rush will come into play as we get further on into the battle. But I've done a really good job of mitigating my damage, and a lot of ships just haven't shot at me, right? Which is what we want. We don't want ships to shoot us in this ship. We want to play at range and act like we're not even a big concern. What else skills do I run on this ship? Obviously, Eye in the Sky. It's going to decrease my spotter duration, but it's going to increase or decrease the cooldown, which I'm going to have more spotters up more frequently, and I'm going to help mitigate that range disadvantage I have, which is like 17 point something. I don't have the number in front of me, but the range, again, is pretty similar to that of the Zhao, maybe exceeding it by a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'll put in a little blub here in the top left corner of the screen, and I'll clarify the range for you guys. And then obviously expert loader or whatever that's, switching the shells from HE to AP to make sure I take full advantage of that. And obviously incoming fire alert because I want to know if I get detected. Now, those 2 skills, I don't mind if you want to drop and go ahead and spec into demolition expert to give you an extra % of fire if you want to do that. For me though, it's kind of nice to know if someone that's spotted is shot at me, and it gives me that kind of warning to know to maneuver accordingly. Again, if you're want to play on the wild side, then yeah, if you want to take full advantage of the demo expert skill and go ahead and use that. But again, 1% for me, it's really splitting hairs here to see if it's going to be really worth it. So that's on you, not me. So all right, as we're closing at the final end of this battle, this was a phenomenal battle in my Kushiro because I'm trying to showcase, and this was a cherry-picked game because I want to showcase to you guys that this ship has a very big misconception about being bad in this game, and I don't understand why. Okay. Also, keep in mind this ship, the 8-kilometer torpedoes are like the squiggle torpedoes that you have on the Takashi Yodo line too. I forgot to mention that, but that is something you're seeing right there, which is increasing our torpedo I guess, firing angles, making them rather quite good. Again, though, they're 8 kilometers, so they're, for in situations like this, shouldn't have used both my torpedo launchers here in this scenario, but hey, you know what? The more you know, that you live and you learn, right? So, but yeah, my final thoughts about the Kushiro, and I already kind of started. I think the community has a very bad misconception of the ship, and I can't help but think that a lot of players that don't necessarily specialize in cruisers or aren't really gravitated towards the cruiser playstyle is going to think this ship sucks. And I understand that. I agree with you. If you're a battleship main, if you're a destroyer main, yeah, the ship is not going to feel very good. And you're going to be like, why the fuck would I waste my 10,000 festive tokens on this when I can go ahead and play the Zao for free just by grinding up the line? And yeah, I 100% agree with you. If that's you, do not waste your time on the Kushiro. But if you're like me, as a cruiser main, I think this ship has a lot of untapped potential. And I actually quite enjoy her. Do I find her more enjoyable than the Zao? No, I never said that. But I do find her to be way better than I think people are giving her credit for. And I think the big problem is that we're doing, like I said in the beginning of this video, to reiterate this point, people are comparing the ship to the Zao unknowingly when they should be comparing the ship more to that of the Yodo. This is basically a heavy cruiser with a Yodo light cruiser playstyle that has the option to fall off detection at, at the click of a fuel exhaust smoke button, and if a broadsiding cruiser or battleship at broadside at closer ranges presents itself, then you can switch to your AP and really punish those ships. The ship's playstyle just feels more in line with that of the Yodo. But yeah, the one big thing that throws a lot of people off is, well, the 203s and the 8-kilometer torpedoes. So it has to be like the Zao. Yeah, in my opinion, the Zao is going to beat this thing in a straight-up competition. But again, because we have consumables at our disposal, like the fuel exhaust smoke, it allows us to have a different kind of strategy or kind of a safety net in our back pocket that allows us to play around these consumables, and kind of make it's a tool, is what I'm trying to say. It's a tool, and you utilize the tool how you seem fit. If you know what you're doing, you understand the game, then you know when and where to utilize these fuel exhaust smokes. If you don't understand the game, if you're just kind of like going through the motions, you haven't quite developed that overall play style of how to utilize fuel exhaust smokes, Japanese heavy cruisers, this ship is going to feel rather anemic for you. And I understand that. But I would be doing you guys a disservice if I didn't make a video about this ship, because again, I'm never going to name other CCs or content creators or anything like that. That's stupid. Again, at the end of the day, you should listen to other opinions and you should take other opinions into consideration, whether or not to buy a ship or get a ship, or whether or not to, certain play style, how to build a ship. You should try different things out. But I'm telling you, from someone who loves cruisers and understands how to play them, and by the result you're going to see that I'm getting in this game, and other games to come, I know how to play this ship, okay? And the expert level badge, which is kind of stupid, but whatever, I guess shows you that A, I got lucky in a game, but and two, that I've kind of mastered, I understand how to play this ship, okay? Do yourself a favor, listen to everybody else, and then come to your own conclusion after doing different builds and see what works for you. I can tell you right now, for me, if I was trying to recommend this ship to other cruiser mains, I would say absolutely. I would say absolutely, at least in my opinion, right? But if you're not a cruiser main and you don't quite understand how to play cruisers as of yet, I can't go ahead and give you the recommendation on the ship, just because there is some quirks that need to be understood with how to play this vessel. Okay? That's all I'm trying to say, guys. And also, on another side note, the fact that this ship didn't get submarine surveillance to me kind of seems kind of like, why? I don't understand why, since the whole tech line gets it. They could have at least done us a favor and a solid and gone ahead and given us the sub-surveillance radar on the ship, because that would, again, allowed the versatility for this for this said ship, right? So anyways, here's the final results, guys. With our E-rank game, Kraken game, 264,000 damage. Again, only 2 torpedoes. And when did I land those? In a brawling situation that I most likely didn't want to be in, but the Azuma was charging my cap. You don't have to utilize these torpedoes. Don't allow these torpedoes to force you in a situation that you're not comfortable in, because this ship is played at medium to long ranges. That is what this ship can do. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review, a different style of ship analysis, and I will go ahead and continue to make content for you guys in the days to come. Stay safe and stay tuned for more. Peace out, guys.